After creating the world, God planted a beautiful garden called Eden. It was filled with tall, shady trees, colorful flowers, and delicious fruits of every kind. The sound of birds singing and rivers flowing made it a peaceful and joyful place. In the middle of the garden, God placed two special trees. One was called the Tree of Life, and the other was called the Tree of the Knowledge of Good and Evil. These trees were very important. God created the first man, Adam, from the dust of the ground. Then he breathed life into Adam. God gave Adam the job of caring for the garden and naming all the animals. But God noticed something. Even with all the animals and beauty of the garden, Adam didn't have anyone like him to talk to or share his life with. So God caused Adam to fall into a deep sleep. While Adam slept, God took one of his ribs and used it to create the first woman, Eve. When Adam woke up and saw Eve, he was filled with joy. God had made Eve to be Adam's partner, and together they would take care of the garden and enjoy everything God had made. Adam and Eve were very happy in the garden. They walked with God and talked to Him every day. They felt no sadness or fear because everything was perfect, just as God intended it to be. The Garden of Eden was full of wonderful things for Adam and Eve to enjoy. They could eat juicy apples, sweet berries, and crunchy nuts from any tree in the garden, except one. God gave them one important rule about the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Adam and Eve listened carefully to God's words. They loved Him and wanted to follow His instructions. The garden was so beautiful, and there were so many other trees to enjoy. Day after day, Adam and Eve worked together to care for the garden. They watered the plants, picked fruits, and named new animals. They laughed and played, feeling happy and close to God. But the tree of the knowledge of good and evil stood quietly in the middle of the garden, its fruit hanging brightly. God had given Adam and Eve the gift of free will. They could choose to follow Him or not. The rule about the tree was a way for Adam and Eve to show their trust and love for God. Even though they didn't understand everything about the tree, they knew God's words were true. Trusting God's wisdom and following His rule kept their hearts close to Him and their lives filled with peace. One sunny day in the Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve were busy enjoying the beauty of their home. The garden was full of wonders, bright flowers, chirping birds, and delicious fruits hanging from the trees. But in the midst of all this beauty, a sneaky creature was watching. This creature was a serpent, and it was very clever. But what Adam and Eve didn't know was that the serpent had been influenced by someone who wanted to turn them away from God. This someone was Satan. The serpent slithered up to Eve as she was admiring the trees. Eve looked at the serpent and listened. The serpent's words made her curious. She began to wonder what it would be like to know good and evil. The serpent pointed to the fruit hanging from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. It looked so beautiful, bright, juicy, and perfect. Eve felt a tug in her heart. She had always trusted God, but now she was tempted to believe the serpent's words. Eve stood by the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, staring at its fruit. The serpent's words echoed in her mind, filling her with curiosity and doubt. The fruit looked so delicious, and the idea of gaining wisdom like God's was tempting. Slowly, Eve reached out and plucked a piece of the fruit. For a moment, everything was still. Then, she took a bite. The fruit was sweet, but something didn't feel right. Eve turned to Adam, who had been watching silently. She offered him the fruit, and he hesitated. But instead of saying no, Adam took a bite too. As soon as they ate the fruit, something changed. Adam and Eve looked at each other and realized they were naked. They quickly gathered leaves to cover themselves, feeling embarrassed for the first time. That evening, as the sun began to set, Adam and Eve heard God walking in the garden. They felt afraid and hid among the trees. God asked them what had happened, and they explained. God was sad because Adam and Eve had disobeyed Him. He gave consequences to the serpent, to Eve, and to Adam. Finally, God said they must leave the garden. He made clothes for them from animal skins and placed angels with flaming swords at the entrance to keep them from returning. As Adam and Eve walked away, they felt sad and heavy-hearted. But they also remembered something God said. One day, a Savior would come to make things right again. Even though they had made a mistake, God's love for them had not changed. This was the beginning of a new chapter in their lives, a chapter where they would learn to trust God even outside the perfect garden He had created.